St. James School.
Yeah, I think it's late now. Okay, okay, thank you. It's now 3,000.
One of the speakers is coming when it's done.
Sure, sir.
I don't want to.
Yeah, interrupt. Yeah, sure, sir.
Someone once said, when we are born, we are a gift from God. When we die, that gift is returned. On 17th February 2023, exactly 40 days ago, we got the sad and shocking news of the passing away of Mr. John Mason. Mr. John Mason joined St. James's School as principal in 1978. He was then only 33 years of age. He spent 14 glorious years taking the school forward and achieving new heights. In these 14 years, he inspired a generation of students and teachers that will last the test of time. Today, we are celebrating the life and times of John Mason. We have knit together a short program that will reflect the love and respect he commanded. I have with me our senior coordinator, Mr. Chaco, who will be the master of ceremonies and take us through the program. Mr. Chaco.
Thank you, sir, for your opening words of tribute. The Gospel of Matthew chapter 25-21 is apt for Mr. Mason. It says, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of the Lord." Today we believe that Mr. Mason, sir, is safe in the arms of his Creator and Master, Jesus. Now we present the school choir who will be singing, "Jesus, remember me when I come into your kingdom." Our school choir.
kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
Thank you, school choir, for their wonderful rendition. Dr. Ranjan Roy Chaudhary joined St. James's in the year 1978, probably the same time as Mr. Mason joined as principal, and he left after his ISc in the year 1987. Since 2014, Dr. Ranjan Roy Chaudhary is Professor of ENT, Head and Neck Surgery at the Ramakrishna Mission Shiva Pratishthan, and also at the Vivekananda Institute of Medical Sciences. Today, he would like to share fond memories of his association with Sir. Dr. Ranjan.
Mr. Ireland, members of the staff, fellow Jacobians, friends. As Mr. Chaco said, I joined St. James's in August 1978. Actually, my family had relocated from the UK, and my father was a Xaverian. He just assumed that his ex-school would admit me, which they didn't. So when they didn't, my father made inquiries, and he heard about this school with a new principal, and that culminated in a 5-minute interview for me with Mr. Mason in the school office. And I don't know what potential Mr. Mason saw, because at that point in time I had an incomprehensible accent, and I struggled with simple arithmetic. He asked me a couple of sums which I made a total mess of. But anyway, he decided to admit me, so I was admitted in class 3 for all of 3 days, and then I was promoted to class 4. And then I spent the rest of my time in James until I left in March 1987. Yeah, so that's when I completed my ISc. So I left as school captain in 1987, and my father became a good friend of Mr. Mason, so we kept in touch over the years. It's difficult to know what to actually say. I think that the words that you associate, or at least the words that I associate with him, are discipline, determination, self-belief. Apart from his obvious drive to improve the academic profile of the school, he was always very supportive of co-curricular activities, and I found myself, much against my will, I was a leading contender for the laziest boy in school contest, but I found myself, much against my will, being pushed into dramatics, debating, quizzing, all of which have stood me in tremendous good stead through the rest of my life. I think one of the favourite stories Mr. Mason used to tell people whenever he met me later was how I'd written him a letter. So don't ask me what possessed me, but in class 7, just before the summer vacation, one of the staff, who I got on very well with, suddenly decided to give us an awful lot of maths homework for the vacation. And so I went home in high umbrage and I wrote a letter, the gist of which was, what's the point of us having a summer vacation if you're going to fill it with homework? And I actually put that in an envelope and I addressed it to Mr. J. Mason, Esquire, Principal, St. James's School. I do not know what possessed me, because the next day in school I actually dropped it in his letterbox outside the principal's office and went to class. And then I think we had 8 periods in the day, then 4 periods, the break, and then 4 periods. And I think in the 6th period, suddenly a summons came from the office that Mr. Mason wanted to see me. And so I sat there as he sort of pulled the letter out and said, "Ooh, I've received this letter from you." But anyway, he always used to laugh about it afterwards and shake his head over the one boy who'd actually written him a letter complaining about homework. And that sort of became his motto every time we met after I left school. But anyway, I think the true gauge of what Mr. Mason achieved at the school, I think for me, lies in the fact that when I joined St. James in 1978, and people would ask me, "What school are you at?" And I'd say, "Well, I'm at St. James." Maybe it was the accent, but they would almost mishear it and say, "Oh, you're at St. Xavier's." And then I have to explain, no, I'm at the school that's next to the Joravicha. But by the time I left the school in 1987 as school captain, if someone asked me where I was, and I said I'm at St. James's, they'd say, "Oh, Mr. Mason's school." And that in a nutshell, I think, is what he achieved. I won't take up any more of your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, for sharing all your fond memories. Now we have Himadri Mukherjee, a very committed Jacobian. He was admitted in the nursery under Mr. Mason, and he was till class 3 under Mr. Mason. Today he's going to sing a prayer song, a Bengali prayer song, Agunir Poroshamuni, as a tribute to Sir. Himadri.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. Before I present my musical tribute, I would like to mention a few interactions with Sir, which were very special. Today we are all paying our homage to Mr. Mason, or according to my Bengali mother, who pronounced the name as Mr. Mashup. I really think Sir used to mash up the conscience, personality, and the existence of whoever he interacted with, and brought out the best in them. From discipline to sports, dramatics, music, quiz, debate, and of course, along with that, an overall education. My first interaction with Sir was at my nursery interview, where he shook my small hands and handed me some toffees. This was a memory which I vaguely remember and was restored in my mind by my father. My father was a very renowned veterinary surgeon, and Sir had some pets. So both of them became very good friends. I have vague memories of visiting Sir's house with my father. When I was in class 1 or 2, there was a big probability of me getting kidnapped and killed if demands were not fulfilled. Threat calls and messages were being sent to my family. My parents were very skeptical in letting me out of the house. Sending to school was out of the question. In those days, there were no mobile phones, so keeping constant contact was not possible. My father interacted with Mr. Mason and informed the issue that he will not be able to send me to school indefinitely. Mr. Mason heard what he had to say and then said, "Education cannot be put on hold. A parent must bring him to school and a parent has to pick him up back home. The remaining time, he is my responsibility." He made arrangements for a secret guard to keep an eye on me. When he went for his rounds, he would look inside the classroom to see what I was doing. Just like a parent, he kept an eye on me. If he had not taken the responsibility, I might not have been standing here today. I might have been somewhere else, or maybe nowhere. Sir actually saved my life and education without me even knowing it. Thank you so much, sir, for saving my life and education. Mr. Mason left St. James's when I was still in junior school. About 20 years later, I saw Sir again at the 150th Founders Day celebrations. Everyone was flocking around Sir to talk, take pictures, etc. I was also standing among the crowd. He looked at me and called me forward and asked, "Are you Dr. Mukherjee's son?" I was astonished and asked, "How could you recognize me, sir?" He said, "You look a lot like your father." Then he asked me my name and then on a second thought said, I will always call you Mr. Mukherjee, as that sounds a lot like calling your father. Since then, he has always referred to me as Mr. Mukherjee. During the COVID times, there were a lot of online events organized by the school and the alumni. He used to watch each of them and send his comments, views, and advice to me. He was extremely happy on watching the online Founders Day service. He called me up and said he was so happy that he was able to participate in the Founders Day service after so many years. He congratulated all the teachers and the team behind it. Since the past 2 Decembers, with the help of the alumni, I have been sending Christmas cards to all the past, present teachers and staff. Mr. Mason had also received a card. He called up on the 3rd week of December last year and said, "Mr. Mukherjee, I have received a beautiful Christmas card with a chocolatey perk inside. I have kept it hidden." I asked, "Why, sir?" He said, "I will have it after lunch." I said, "Do give a portion to ma'am also." He said, "I will think about it," and then burst into laughter. After a few more lines, he said, "Mr. Mukherjee, just like your father, I am also proud of you, son. In fact, I am blessed and extremely thankful that I have been able to touch the lives of so many Jacobians, students, and others. They have all grown up to be such fine gentlemen and human beings. I feel very proud of everyone." These were some of the final words that I had with him on that blessed December day. I guess Sir has never heard me perform, but he had once said that he is very happy that even though studying at an English medium school, I have kept my Bengali roots and culture intact in my life and my musical career. Today, as a tribute to Sir, I will be performing a Bengali prayer song, and I am sure wherever you are, Sir, you will hear me today. My heartfelt condolences to the entire family, and I pray with my song that the Almighty gives strength to the bereaved to overcome this vacuum. Thank you, Principal Sir, Mr. Chaco, teachers in charge of this memorial service, the alumni, for letting me speak and offer my humble tribute to our dear Mr. Mason. আগুনের পরশমণি ছোঁয়াও প্রাণে, এ জীবন পূর্ণ করো, এ জীবন পূর্ণ করো, এ জীবন পূর্ণ করো, এ জীবন পূর্ণ করো, দহন দানে ফোটাক তারা নব নব, আধারের গায়ে গায়ে পরশ তব, সারা রাত ফোটাক তারা নব নব, নয়নের দৃষ্টি হতে ঘুচবে কালো, যেখানে পড়বে সেথায় দেখবে আলো, নয়নের দৃষ্টি হতে ঘুচবে কালো, যেখানে পড়বে সেথায় দেখবে আলো, ব্যথা মোর উঠবে জ্বলে ঊর্ধ্বপানে, ব্যথা মোর উঠবে জ্বলে ঊর্ধ্বপানে, আগুনের পরশমণি ছোঁয়া প্রাণে, এ জীবন পূর্ণ করো, এ জীবন পূর্ণ করো, এ জীবন পূর্ণ করো, এ জীবন পূর্ণ করো, দহন দানে, আগুনের পরশমণি ছোঁয়া প্রাণে। सर्वेषां स्वस्तिर्भवतु, सर्वेषां शान्तिर्भवतु, सर्वेषां पूर्णं भवतु, सर्वेषां मङ्गलं भवतु, सर्वे भवतु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामया, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति। So, may your soul rest in eternal peace. Amen. Om Shanti. Amen.
Thank you, Himadri, for the very touching message and above all for the song which you sang so very melodiously. It's been a pleasure these days talking to Jacobians under Mr. Mason, and one of them is Mr. Saurav Chatterjee. Mr. Saurav Chatterjee is in the sports business management. He's been focusing on training young boys to realize their potential and giving them a lot of opportunities. He was in St. James's only for 2 years, from 87 to 1990. And in these 2 years, Mr. Mason has made a tremendous impact on his life. And he said that in the year 1990, he won all the sporting awards in St. James's. And he went on to start a business in sports. That speaks volumes of Mr. Mason. Now I invite Mr. Saurav Chatterjee to share his memories.
Good morning, respected teachers, friends, and fellow Jacobians. It's been 33 years since I left this beautiful school, and I must say, I've been working for 30 years. I've never been late for anything. I've never missed a flight. And here I am, many years later, come back to this school, and I think Mr. Mason must have conspired, and I'm back to being a backbencher and a latecomer. So apologies for that, but the things were not in my control, and that's why I got a bit late. There are people who come into this world to make a difference, to change the way we see things, the manner in which we approach life. It's those people who make you see the bigger picture in life without making it complicated that leave a permanent mark. These special people are superheroes for those that they help. Every young child has their heroes in life, people they look up to and feel that they can do no wrong. In my life, I had 4 heroes. My parents, Sunil Gavaskar, who I happen to have worked with for a long period in my life, and Mr. John Mason. With cricket being a religion in our country and with so many opinions, every now and then I need to defend Mr. Gavaskar from trolls and biased opinions. But Mr. Mason is someone that is universally respected and loved. As students, we had fierce rivalries with many schools and often said the nastiest things about a rival school just to gain a very unfair, immature upper hand. But no one, to my knowledge, ever had anything negative to say about Mr. Mason. That was him, a simple but towering personality. I spent 10 years in St. Xavier's School and arrived in St. James to avoid doing the Ucha Madhyamik because my terrible command of the Bengali language ensured that I had to do the Delhi board. So when I entered the portals of Jora Girja, little did I know that my world would change forever and that I would be a completely different person walking out 2 years later. Those 2 years were the most enjoyable yet defining years of my life. There were a number of us who joined St. James in class 11 from my old school, St. Xavier's, and of course from other schools around the city and the country. We were a little apprehensive about how we would fit in or be accepted. I have absolutely no hesitation in saying this out loud. Today I feel much more of a Jacobian than a Xaverian, in spite of spending only 2 years in this school. It's the love and warmth of all the teachers, my classmates and fellow Jacobians over the years that have made it like this for me. It's the special environment of love, care and encouragement that made St. James a special place. All of this was engineered and designed by the visionary that Mr. Mason was. He groomed a team of teachers who all shared those values and qualities that he had. And all the students in the school from a very young age were groomed to be better human beings. In most schools in the city, especially the school I came from, students were labeled. You were either good at academics and immediately the school looked at you as a potential 6-pointer and a topper. Or you were good at cricket or football or athletics or drama, elocution. In my old school, you were kind of intimidated to shrug off these labels and try something new. For example, my best friends in school were Gary O'Brien and Mohit Nair, both of whom came to St. James later. And they were the best athletes in St. Xavier's. On sports day, I was always their cameraman, taking pictures of them winning all the races. I never ventured beyond line and spoon race or the 3-legged race, which was for those who were presumed not good enough to run in the big ticket, 100 meters, 200 meters, etc. I had the label of a cricketer, which meant I would have to wait all year to wait for cricket season and then boss around the campus. We wouldn't have the guts to try ourselves out at hockey and football because over the years, those teams were fairly well established. However, in St. James, Mr. Mason created a positive vibe where students were encouraged to try their hand out at anything, especially extracurricular activities, and given a very fair chance. If it wasn't for that encouragement to try something new, I would not still be holding two of the oldest records in athletics, something which all my friends from St. Xavier's still can't believe. In St. James, we had no labels. We were encouraged to try our hand at everything, even singing, dancing, safety patrol. All the teachers, led by Mr. Mason, took personal interest in everything that the school was involved in, especially sport. Mr. Vincent for hockey, Mr. Kevin Ward for football, Mr. Chatterjee for cricket, Mr. Sayers, Mr. Ken Ward, Mr. Brian Martin for athletics. Everyone was most encouraging. It wasn't a coincidence that every time the school team played on our grounds, there was a certain bearded gentleman peeping out of his window and watching the proceedings. The next day at assembly, there would be a comment or an observation on how we performed. Today, I work on the grassroots development of sport in our country, with our programs reaching out to thousands of kids all over India, giving them opportunities to help them develop their talent. This was a much needed thing to do in our country, and without any hesitation, I can say that I got inspired by Mr. Mason and the teachers of St. James to do this passionately, just as they did for me and my friends when we tried to play sport in school. I have so many fantastic memories of my time in school here, especially with Mr. Mason. I would like to share a few anecdotes which showcase his sense of humor, his humane and soft side, as well as his completely down-to-earth side, which made him such an iconic leader. As many of the teachers who remember me from school and my batch was a really notorious one. But we all got along famously and were united to the T. 3 of my friends, their fathers were deputy commissioners in police. I wish they still were, so that maybe there were no traffic jams today, but anyway. And we as a gang took full advantage of that and foolishly thought that we could get away with anything. So once, we used to take maths tuitions from Mr. Menezes, and there was this time break between school finishing and our tuition time. So we would drift towards the cold drink stall just outside Frank Anthony's. No coincidence that quite a few Pratt Memorial girls used to be around there. Anyway, one day, out of nowhere, we got into a bit of a heated argument with the FAPS boys. And it was something really silly. And one of the boys from our group, who was notorious in his time, turned around and told them to back off. And when we were badly outnumbered, so he turned around and said, and I quote, "Sab ko utha dega." So, which was a very common threat in those days. We walked back to school, laughing to ourselves as we got saved by some quick thinking on his part, because there were just 3 or 4 of us and there were God knows how many of them. But the next day at assembly, we were shocked to see the FAPS principal along with 6 of these boys from the incident. The 3 of us did try to avoid bumping into them and very cleverly slipped away, but Mr. Mason was too smart for us. He ensured that the 3 of us were identified and brought to his room. There we met with the FAPS principal, and the boys were still very agitated by that threat. So Mr. Mason, after hearing them out, asked us for our version and said, who made that threat? There was no way the 2 of us were going to rat out our pal, but again, this friend of mine and his quick thinking, he turned around and said, "Sir," and he pointed out to the biggest among them, and he said, "Sir, he's a bodybuilder." So I told him that I will lift him up and show that even we can lift heavy weights. So Mr. Mason then turned to the principal of FAPS and said, this just looks like a misunderstanding of a very small issue. He made us all shake hands and proceeded to make the bodybuilder do poses with his triceps and biceps, which made the young fellow really happy, and we all walked out of there saved. So Mr. Mason either was too simple a man to understand street side threats, or with his people skills, he saved his boys from a really embarrassing situation. Either way, that incident showed him in great light in our books. I had many a run-in with Mr. Mason and other teachers during my short time in St. James. I had metamorphosized from this timid, bespectacled, awkward lad in St. Xavier's to a confident person who at times was a bit too big for his boots in St. James. Being a complete prankster, I was again complained against by one of our teachers for calling him a name which all the students in St. James had given him. Mr. Mason called me, admonished me, and gave me detention. And just as he saw me walking away sadly, he said, Saurabh, if you call me Superman or Batman, I would be thrilled. But not everyone is alike, and had no business shouting out to a teacher by calling him a comic superbook hero, which he didn't appreciate being called. Managing difficult situations but keeping your sense of humor intact was one of his best traits. He was a man manager par excellence. I could go on and on for hours about stories about Mr. Mason, but I shall conclude with something, again funny, but something that ensured that we had mutual admiration for the rest of our lives. The St. James Lamartnia rivalry, especially in sports and extracurricular activities, was at its peak when we were in school. From epic relay races to volatile football, hockey and cricket matches, the rivalry was unreal. It was almost like India-Pakistan cricket matches. As usual, I was at the heart of every battle, especially the verbal ones, and my favorite line to all of them every time we played a match was, "Ladies and gentlemen, it's Lamartnia for boys versus St. James's for men." Mr. Mason loved it, and whenever he heard that being quoted. But apart from being a jibe at our school rivals, the bit about us Jacobians being men when we came out of school was completely true. And we have Mr. Mason to thank for that. He ensured that he was guiding and shaping our lives through an institution where he created an environment of thorough and complete education. I still don't know if I will ever need to use calculus in my life, but the life lessons in St. James, under the guidance of Mr. Mason, I have always carried with me in my journeys. Rest in peace, sir. You will be thrilled to know that for many of us, you are that Superman that you once said you wouldn't mind being referred to, and you always will be our Superman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Saurabh Chatterjee, for sharing all your personal experiences at St. James's under Mr. Mason, especially that part of St. James's men. Thank you. Every Jacobian under Mr. Mason would say, "Sir, you are the wind beneath our wings." Now, Mr. Jacob Abhinav Sarkar, who is head of the English department at St. Thomas's Church School, Howrah, is going to dedicate a song to Mr. Mason, "Sir, You Are the Wind Beneath Our Wings" by Betty Midler.
Even as I take this opportunity to dedicate a song to Principal Sir, I have this mortal fear of calling my principals by name. For me, it's Mr. Iron Sir. I cannot call my principals by name. It's just ingrained in me somehow. But unlike everybody else who has spoken about Mr. Mason Sir, I have not studied under him, and I do not have an anecdote to share or a story to tell. But I do believe that he has passed on that spirit of St. James's, and that is present. And in and through each and every one present here, everyone who spoke, and every person that I've met in my 14 years in St. James's, I believe I know Mr. Mason Sir, and that he too is my principal. So this song goes out to Sir. It must have been cold there in my shadow to never have sunlight on your face. You were content to let me shine
way. You always walked a step behind. So I was the one with all the glory, while you were the one with all the strength. A beautiful face without a name for so long. A beautiful smile to hide the pain. Did you ever know that you're my hero? And everything I would like to be. And I can fly higher than an eagle. 'Cause you are the wind beneath my wings. Might have appeared to go unnoticed, but I've got it all here in my heart. I want you to know I know the truth. Of course I know it. I would be nothing without you. Did you ever know that you're my hero? You're everything I wish I could be. I could fly higher than an eagle. 'Cause you are the wind beneath my wings. Did I ever tell you you're my hero? You're everything, everything I wish I could be. And I could fly higher than an eagle. 'Cause you are the wind beneath my wings. Oh, wind beneath my wings. Fly, fly, fly away. Fly, fly, fly high against the sky. So high I almost touch the sky. Thank you, God, for Mr. Mason, the wind beneath our wings.
Thank you, Jacob. That was excellent. Next, we have Mr. Ismail Nehal, who joined St. James's in the year 1951. He was under 5 principals. He was a teacher from the year 1970 to 2005.
Thank you.
And I think he now became the longest serving housemaster of Lefroy House from 1972 to 2005. I must also add that Mr. Nehal is truly passionate about St. James's and all what it stands for. So I request Mr. Nehal to share all his collection of anecdotes. Mr. Nehal, sir.
Good morning, everyone. At the outset, I would like to thank Mr. Eiler, St. James's School, St. James's Alumni Association for providing me this opportunity to speak in this today's memorial service. Out of many anecdotes, it's not possible for the time constraint to share with you. So some of them I will be narrating those anecdotes with Mr. Mason, which we had at St. James's. Now that anecdotes will throw light on Mr. Mason as educationist, administrator, and a human person. You have heard the versions of the students just now today from Saurabh and also Dr. Bhattacharya. Now I will be sharing as a colleague and as a teacher and administrative point of view, and I will be sharing. First, I came to know Mr. Mason when Mr. Pakinathan sent a group of boys to see the play put up, because he used to put a play, very famous for it, at Lamartine. And that was my first assisting of Mr. Mason, which I came to know, Joan of Arc at Lamartine he has. Thereafter, when he joined St. James's, I had a close interaction with him and encounters also with him, which a few of them, I'll narrate and see what you will draw, what I will anecdotes, you draw your conclusion about the personality he was, what he was. So first, I start with the staff meeting, the first staff meeting which was held, where Mr. Mason was first met the staff. There were suggestions from many people of different, which from where he came, because that school was known as one of the famous schools in Calcutta. He said to us that this St. James's has a past glory, and all those traditions, and we have to, has been famous. Now we have to work on that and work it and together. And if I will not bring anything from Lamarck's at St. James and implant it. We have to build it from here, from scratch, and that is what he did. Next, my thing was that very year after we did, I was fortunate to do B.Ed with him, crash course at St. Xavier's, and that B.Ed crash course, the batch was one of the top batch of all the principals, all the vice principals, all the teachers crash course we did. So I was along with him. I was fortunate that all the study Mr. Mason used to do, I used to come to his quarters, sit down, take little notes, and together we used to go in a taxi to give the examination. And when in that he insisted, when I tried to pay for the taxi, also he would insist no. And then he said, okay, finally he made an agreement with me that we will do it alternately. One day you pay, one day we will. This is the one thing, and I was fortunate to study with him in this. Next, I regard Mr. Mason, he's like a gem cutter. The reason, just now you heard about two students. Now I am giving you that like a gem cutter, what happens? He picks up from the coal something, and he cuts, and finally it looks like a coal, that thing. But then finally he makes the best diamond he brings out. That was what Mr. Mason. He brought the best, he saw the potential in a person, and then he brought the best out of him. Either by his method, different methods, sometimes he used to be coercive method also, which many people did not like, but he brought the best out of that person and that person. And he has groomed many principal and vice principal from the St. James's, and he placed them in different schools also. There was only, I'm not time constraint, I'm not going to name those people, but only one people I'll tell you that why he declined, and Mr. Mason could not make him because of his temperament. Mr. David Sales. He did not like it because Mr. Mason wanted him to go out into take charge of some school. There was another thing also which I can't recollect, but this thing, the name, but another teacher, because I used to work with Mr. Mason very closely, so he came and he complained to me that Mr. Mason is always after him and I was taking him off. When I told Mr. Mason, where I met him and I used to interact with him, and I said, why are you against? He said, no, I'm not against that person. I'm trying to bring it up because like when he gave his example, that like, see, I am today Mason and what I am here because of Mr. Colonel Simeons in Lambertinia. He was after us and we used to think that way. This is another. Now, this is what was Mr. Mason's thing. Next is Mr. Mason also insisted on teaching. I'm going to rush through because I think I'm taking lots of time. So he used to take regular classes, class 12. The reason what he said when we told his reason he gave was if you want to have your finger on the pulse of the school, you must be in touch with class 12, not to be only in the assembly, but also teach them. And he used to do regular correction, regularly. He used to take his size books to his quarters and he used to do regular corrections. He even taught, when he saw a boy and he said, like, Mr. Patak, I'm cutting it short because there's a story behind it. I'm just giving you this thing because of time again constraint, that how this came about is a story behind it. Mr. Patak was a teacher, his son was weak, not very good student in English. Finally, Mr. Mason took him charge of it and he taught him and he did well in the ICSA examination and ISC examination. Another thing we have I think he is still there, Ramapati Pandey, Pune. When he showed his desire to appear in the privately in the Madhyamik examination, Mr. Mason taught him in English and also in Uच्च Madhyamik, and he did quite well in his examination Madhyamik and Uच्च Madhyamik through the tuition of Mr. Mason. This was because of the Mr. Mason. Mr. Mason had this. Next, whenever we used to have lots of absentees sometimes, then Mr. Mason will tell Mr. Roddick that do one thing, you're having problem, because we were used to always complain against how can you have giving me two supervision, only one supervision. Mr. Mason will step in and he will take charge. He said, okay, Mr. Roddick, give me one more period, give me those periods, don't burden them. This was. Now, Founders Day celebration in St. James's, because I'm an old Jacobean from 1951, I said, very seldom, I don't recollect that ever in the St. James's Founders Day celebration, any Roman Catholic church person, clergy were invited as a chief guest. Mr. Mason made it a point and he invited the Roman Catholic clergy person, Archbishop, in the service. From that time, another thing, he introduced a Bengali recitation from Rabindranath Tagore on the church, inside the church. It was the captain of the school, sang, and he recited that. And from that long, we have been singing and other things on. That is what I'm giving you what he introduced in St. James's. Another thing for teachers, staff, there were people who used to take at the drop of a hat casual leave because it's my right. Why should I go to school? Even there is no need. But there were also teachers who were very regular. Hardly they used to take even one day, or not even a single day in the year. So Mr. Mason would not clamp down on this absentees. So finally he decided he would have introduced it. I don't know whether it is still there in St. James's or not. He introduced encashment of casual leave. And we used to, so automatically that fell through. Only 3 people, when you urgently need it, then you took the casual leave. Otherwise, people were at least for that encashment of casual leave he introduced. Another thing, which all the Anglo-Indian schools and all the teachers should be thankful to Mr. Mason. In 1986, I think, there was a Supreme Court verdict that all, whether private school or mandatory school, will come under the purview of the Employees Provident Fund Act 1956. So the management and the heads association of the school were thinking of challenging that in Kolkata High Court. Mr. Mason prevailed over them, and finally he told them, no, this is the right of the teaching, we should not do this, we must not deprive, and so the purview became, all the Anglo-Indian scale came under the purview of Provident Fund because of Mr. Mason's insistence in the heads association and also with the governing body. And that is what. And for CNI school, he especially brought this, no, we will not go to the government, but we will make our own existing rules and regulation, and we'll keep the money with us, our own. And he kept this, and he dropped up, this is also detailed, I'm not going how he worked about this. I can tell you about how he worked through this rules and regulation, and in which I was one of the part with him. I helped with him, the Provident Fund which we have now. Now in this regard, Provident Fund, I tell you another thing. See the man's thing. There was again cutting short story that a person, he expired. His balance about 30 to 40,000 rupees at that time was supposed to be paid. The office was making it difficult, following the law book that you have to bring succession certificate. Finally, Mr. Mason sat with me and he discussed with me, how come this is the route, what do you think? So I advised him that no, see, this is not possible because only for 30,000 succession certificate will take 2 years and amount of money. But we know it is for sure that he is a son, and so we can give it to his son. So I suggested, this is the main part. I suggested, for precaution, we can take an affidavit. He said, what is an affidavit? I explained to him. He said, done. He called Mr. Nandi and he told Mr. Nandi that please get the check ready. I want it today, afternoon. I'm going to Darjeeling. I'll sign it. Tomorrow he brings the affidavit. I will pay him. When he told me affidavit, where will it be done? I said, Sialda Court can be done. He said, how much it costs? I said, if he goes 150, if I take it, it will be 70 rupees. He said, okay, done. You do this for him. Don't send him. You help him tomorrow. And then he took out his purse and he said, I said, no, I'll take it from him. Don't worry about it. He said, no. He's a poor person. He said, boy, he's come from Orissa. He put Nadi. He answered, I do. Another Provident Fund which I am telling you, when Provident Fund was implemented, each teachers was supposed to pay, there were about 30 to 40,000 because of the retrospective effect the law came in, of the Supreme Court order. So Mr. Neza asked Mr. Mason while we were meeting that should we ask the teachers to sit? Mr. Mason was, Mr. Neza, the teachers are giving their life, the best teachers we have. Can't the school do something for them? No, they will not pay. School will pay their contribution for the backlog. From now on they will be deducted. This is Mr. Mason's way of. So you see, they are giving their life, their best, whatever, do for the school. Why can't we do this? Another thing, trustee. It's Provident Fund trustee. There's other incidents also, I'm not narrating it, it's not time. In another school, in St. Thomas's Day School, this happened, and Father Bishop what Mr. Mason played a role there. Over here, I'm telling you. There will be trustees for the Provident Fund. 3 from employer's side, that is the school, and 3 from the employees. Employees, teachers election, he insisted no, there should be also from the class D staff. And that is the reason he brought in Pandey again, that he will be a trustee and an election, especially election that he made it, that he said no, there must be, otherwise the teachers will elect their own themselves also, and this is what happened in St. Thomas Day School. I think the time is too long. Death of Mr. Neza. Founders Day, 24th July, 5 o'clock in the morning. Distress call for Mrs. Neza. Mr. Mason, Mr. Menezes rushed to Mr. Neza's place. On reaching there, he realized that the operation is needed because he had a excruciating pain in stomach. Dr. Reddy, Dr. Nursing Home, Dr. Ghosh, one of the students was here. got ready to operation theatre immediately. 6 o'clock they were supposed to rush to there. While Mr. Mason and Mr. Neza went to the washroom to dress up, he collapsed. Mr. Mason rushed in, and in the lap of Mr. Mason, Mr. Neza expired. That shock, Mr. Mason could not take it. He could turn back finally and told us, and then the Founders Day celebration, he said, keep me alone, let me be, I can't, you all manage. That is what Mr. Neza. Thereafter, Mrs. Neza was having a problem with her landlord. Mr. Neza, this is also Mr. Mason went and got the landlord from the landlord. The court case was withdrawn. Plus, at the same, the name of Mrs. Neza was on the rent receipt. Without a single NAPAS are not increasing the rent receipt. That is, he prevailed on this. He took me along. He knew which person to use for what. He was a stickler for punctuality. You have heard in the service, Mr. Lord, as he said, that if it rains, you must say, yeah, it's a sarcastic way. So now I'm giving you another. It's sports day. I was in charge of the march past. That used to be Mr. Neza used to announce, ladies and gentlemen, the chief guest is here, and I used to get the guide ready, everything ready, and start, and as soon as he said, no, we start with the march past. Without that mentioning that, Mr. Neza just said that we are starting with the march past. I saw that there is no one, the chief guest has not arrived. Finally, whatever, and the chief guest was international hockey player, Indian international hockey player. Then he immediately said, oh gosh, who is going to take the salute? Well, whatever it is. Finally, we saw Father Manuel on the dais, on the flag post, and he took the salute. And finally, when in the evening, when we were having tea, after 5 to 10 minutes, the chief guest arrived, and then we told him that we could have waited. He said, Mr. Nihal, St. James's 2 o'clock means 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock means 2 o'clock. And we teach the students to be on time. We have to be practiced the same thing. This is Mr. Mason. Duty of the school fest. The first time, there used to be lauding. Also, you know, at school rivalry, students, especially senior school, when used to come, and the girls student, and this there used to be. We would say that, see, we have to be careful, we not to invite so-and-so school, not to do. He would, in the meeting, he would say, I have 3 terrorists. If they try any trick, I'll let loose my 3 terrorists. Mr. Sayers, Mr. Vincent, Mr. Nehal. Don't worry. I'll take care of them, whoever it has come. Then, first duty. He will insist, Mr. Roddick, to give him duty also. He would stand outside the school hall. We'll tell him, Mr. Mason, don't worry, I'm here. He took duty, he used to take, no, Mr. Vincent and Mr. Sayers together, give me with Mr. Nehal. So he would tell him, sir, why don't you go away? We sit in the office, anything, I'll call you. Any problem? No problem. He stood there on the duty. He was like, there are many more which I'm not sharing with you. I could have, but I wish I could have, but because of the paucity of time, I'll just conclude one with this. He was to me, he made St. James's like a family. Not only teachers, among teachers. He took care not only of the care of the teachers and the school administration, but also in family, something happening. He used to send us some of teachers who can. So he was like a karta of an Indian family, head of the Indian family. He took care of it. Any problem, anything like Mr. Neza, I told you, same with Mrs. Amy, he had problems with the landlord. He sent me along with some other person to the Lal Bazaar to see that we must help them out. There were others also, occasions which he used to. Yeah. Now, he was a very humble, low profile, will not project himself in anywhere. If you see any of these photographs, other things and all in the school, this thing, if you ever have it, he will keep in the background, but to see that the thing is done perfectly and everything. He will keep a very observant person he was. So when Mr. Chaco went to do the school, and asked him, what is the secret of your success? And you have been so famous in St. James as you did. He said, no, I have not done anything. See, I have not done anything. Whatever was I have done, I have used to do. They were very good teachers. I had 10 of them. Mr. Roderick, Mr. Tamurai, Mr. Sayers, Mr. So-and-so, and he named all those teachers, and he said, they were the person, and I was just named later. My name is there because being a principal. But these were the people in the background, and I was in the background, and the front, they're coming, but these are the people who were. This is what Mr. Mason was a person like. This, for me, I conclude, it was a privilege to work under him. I had a good distinct. Yes, one other incident which is very important. Sorry. It was a teachers' association. I was representative. I was a legal distinct, and due to some reason, something which I am not disclosing now, where he and he called me in the office, and we had heated exchange. It went to such an extent that you can say sparks were flying inside. Outside office, Mrs. Stephen at that time, Miss Connie Stephen, and now they were all worried what's happening. Both of us shouting at each other. I was taken up, I did not care. And his language, and he's using all the words which were going over my head. Only word which I understood was, I despise you. So I said, okay, I'll have to give him back. So I also despise you. He thumped the table, I also thumped the. And finally I came out. Everyone was saying, what's happened? He's taken Mr. Mason like a person, and it was complete. And then I went to the water tap, put my head in the water, and went to class after some time. Next day, after assembly, he called me. He seldom, he did not allow anyone to miss class. If class is over, either come when you're free, break time, or after school. He called me. First time, he called me, said, sit down. I said, I got to class. He said, no. He called Panwasi, told him that Mr. Roderick to arrange supervision for Mr. Nehal. And he said, sorry, we had this thing, you have taken the burden out of my heart, we are friends. And from that time also, and before that also, he said, I like you, we must. He used to always talk in one-to-one and straightforwardness. I like your straightforwardness, and this was the man. He had asked for a cup of tea, and we had. And after that, regularly we used to interact with him. This is the type of person Mr. Mason was. And he forgot, I had forgotten, and I forgot after that, and we got together, and in a team like this. And here, I tell you today, we have among us the first captain which Mr. Mason appointed was Muhammad Azhar. When he came in, I was surprised. Then we used to joke with Mr. Mason. He said, has this fellow, because he was a very quiet fellow and never used to be active in anything, but very, he carried himself so well that Mr. Mason thought that he's a very good, he will be captain, because he was the first district. But actually, we thought that we did not have anything that he should be a captain. So we used to joke with Mr. Maybe this is a biryani which he has chosen. Finally, and lastly, we must not forget, behind every man, there is a woman, every successful man. And this was Mrs. Mason, who was always behind Mr. Mason, and she was always a strength behind Mr. Mason. And finally, I had a personal distinct, which also, one-to-one, other things also in my family, which he came, we used to, those are some other occasions, I'm writing a distinct article on him from Kayas magazine. Maybe in that I will narrate, which if possible, I will give to you all also to share with you all. With this, may I pray that may his soul rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nehal, for sharing your personal anecdotes with Mr. Mason. Now we present a documentary, a tribute to a legend. St. James's School, founded in the year 1864. A school which takes pride in its founding fathers, great principals and committed teachers. In the year 1978, a very young principal took the reins of the school at the age of just 33. John Anthony Mason. Mr. Mason was born in Dehradun in the year 1945 and went to study at La Martinia for Boys, Calcutta. At the age of 20, he started his teaching career at La Martinia for Boys. St. James's was blessed in the year 1978 when Mr. Mason walked in to bring about some radical and welcome changes. The seeds were sown by this great educationist to transform this nondescript school to one of the most sought after schools in the city. The morning assembly began with his baritone voice, and no single address by Mr. Mason did not resonate with all.
Good day, everyone. About Mr. Mason, I could write a book, but since I've been given only a few minutes, for now I wish to share some of my experiences. When I joined St. James's School in 1984 and Mr. Mason was the principal. I recall my first interview day. One question he asked me was that if you want to take your junior school boys out onto the field to play and another class is having games over there, what would you do? So I told him we can adjust the timings and maybe go out at another time. He made me walk till his office window and proudly said, "Can you see my field? It can accommodate 4 classes at the same time." Mr. Mason loved St. James's and was proud of his huge field. He was very observant too. In our teacher's record book, we fill up our work done during the day. On one such occasion, I had attached part of a long poem I had taught that day to my 5-year-olds and was to continue the rest another day. He saw it, and the next morning in the record book, I saw the rest of the poem written by him. He had thought maybe that I did not have the full poem. Of course, I did clarify my point when I met him next. As all of you know, Mr. Mason was a strict disciplinarian, of course for the benefit to maintain the standard of the school. We had this ID card system in the junior school during dismissal, and I used to check the ID card every day of each and every student. If anyone forgot to bring it, it was a rule to let them go to the school office and get permission. One day, one mother did not bring the ID card, so I sent her to the school office. She was very angry and went straight to Mr. Mason's office to tell him what I had done, and that I should know that she is the mother and just dismiss the child. She also told him that the other teachers are not doing so. He kept her waiting and called for me. I had several thoughts trying to recall what I had done during the day to receive a call from Mr. Mason. Nervously, I entered his office. He asked me about the incident, and I agreed that I had just done what St. James's rule was. He sat back in his chair and told the parent, this was his style, "You should be proud of this teacher and glad that your child is in her class as she is ensuring the safety of your child." I took a breath of relief and did feel good that he was grateful for my effort. He always appreciated work done well. In the nursery and transition, we did not have marks during the promotion time. The promotion used to be based on all the work done throughout the year. So So on one such day, the transition teachers had gone to his office with a few sample books to show him. I recall that day too. I was a teacher of transition A, so he asked for my books first. On handing them over, he opened a book and started seeing it thoroughly. I felt I had not checked some error of the child, and he had spotted that. But to my surprise, he sat back in his usual style and said, "Is this printed or handwritten? Even if I try my best, I cannot write so neatly." He always wanted quality work rather than quantitative work. Till today, I do follow that and urge my colleagues and students to do the same. Put in 100% effort, whether at work or play. I did learn a lot from being under his able leadership. Thank you, Mr. Mason, for being a good friend, philosopher, and guide during my early years of teaching, and an excellent role model too. May your soul rest in peace. To Mrs. Mason, Neil, Dia, and the family, do accept my heartfelt condolences, and may God give you the strength to bear this loss. He may not be with us, but I am sure all of us shall remember his values and principles all through our lives and shall try to live up to them. Thank you.
St. James's under Mr. Mason scaled new heights in academics, extracurricular activities, and above all in discipline. He was a strict disciplinarian who led by example. Mr. Mason believed in the all-round development of a student, mind and body. A keen rugby player who was at the ground to train his teachers and students. Mr. Mason raised the bar when it came to debating and public speaking. Quizzing was his forte. He was a quiz master at Doordarshan. At St. James's, Mr. Mason produced a string of musicals beginning with Smike, all of which were a runaway success.
I think I was in class 7 when Mr. John Mason took over as the principal of St. James's. He was an English teacher. Apart from being the principal, he took us through Shakespeare, Merchant of Venice, and then Richard II, apart from English grammar. But I think what stood out the most was his constant encouragement to all of us to take part in extracurricular activities. I remember we did Oliver the musical the year he joined or the year after that. And thereafter, every year, we were the winners of, either the winners or the runners-up at the British Council one-act play competition. He introduced us to theatre, to Badal Charka, to proscenium and everything around that. What I feel about Mr. Mason is, apart from the fact that he was a teacher, an administrator, principal, was he encouraged us to think differently. And he was more of a mentor than a teacher. So may his soul rest in peace. Thank you.
Mr. Mason was a perfectionist. He had the uncanny ability to give the final touches to all his plays and debates, bringing everything to a finesse. Mr. Mason had a magnanimous heart, and this was shown by the genuine interest he showed for his teachers and pupils. Every day, Mr. Mason walked around the St. James's School campus nearly thrice a day, showing his sincere concern for each teacher, boy or staff he met on the way. Mr. Mason was a passionate English teacher, but what he taught really well was life skills. He taught countless Jacobians how to pursue excellence. Above all, he taught pupils to explore their inner strength and be the best.
Sir was a very simple man, yet he lived a life of great virtues which he wanted to pass on to everyone he touched in his life. I am one such person, and sir, I will always remember and carry you in my heart.
I'm hardly qualified to say anything about Mr. Mason, but he was one of the most upright and honest persons that I've ever known in my life, and I hope I will be able to follow his ideals and principles in my lifetime.
For me to say something regarding Mr. Mason, I don't have words. All I can just say is he's the man who actually made all of us. He's the man who taught us what discipline is. He's the man who's responsible for where we stand today in life. We will always miss him, always.
Mr. Mason, sir, was one of the few personalities in my life who was always be there in my heart all through my life. That's all I can say.
Good afternoon. To say anything about Mr. Mason, you need a whole day, maybe a couple of days also. But to say within a short word, Mr. Mason was a institution himself. And I'll keep Mr. Mason after my parents. He stands there. Thank you.
Mr. Mason always used to say that he's taught in so many different schools and was principal of so many different schools, but his heart will always be found in St. James. And sir, you made us what we are today, and we can very proudly say you are always will be living within us till we are alive. You were the best that was. Thank you, sir.
Sir, may your soul rest in peace.
Mr. Mason has touched the hearts and minds of thousands of his pupils around the world. A legend in his lifetime. People like him don't rest. They live in our thoughts and heart forever.
my soul.
me that he wanted to go on leave to his village. And of course, he got the leave. Now, as often used to happen, we would receive a telegram which would say something like, "Grandfather hopeless," or "Uncle hopeless," or something of that sort. But in this particular gentleman's case, I didn't receive the usual postcard. What I received was an envelope. The letter was inside, saying who was hopeless. But the envelope said this. I found a way of very quiet now. The envelope said this. P full stop, C full stop, R, P-A-L. Circular Road, Kolkata. And it came to me. You know why? It is perfectly easy to understand. This part.
We will now offer our floral tributes before the portrait of Mr. Mason. We request our principal, Vice Principal, Mr. Mandan, and all our dignitaries to come from my left, the left side, and come up on stage, offer your floral tributes, and go on the right. Also followed by all the alumni members. One teacher just hold the tray. The alumni members can come from the left side, just walk down, come up stage, followed by the teachers. Students, you remain seated. And please go back to your seats because we will end with a school song. The teachers also can come and stand like all our teachers. All teachers, please come to my left.
Thank you, Lama.
Request you to kindly stand for the school song. Please be seated. Request the alumni and the staff to join us for fellowship over a cup of coffee. Okay, thank you.